So if you've been hanging in, there's been a step-by-step series of short videos. And here we are on basically the end of that kind of sequencing. Then we'll do a kind of summary. Dark cave, psychoacoustic sound, fire for light and warmth, flickering fire for inducing altered states, the first mind machine, and then the communal, multi-generational absorption of all of these experiences being normative. This is a special but normal aspect of life. When you go out in the sun and you have to do what you do, there's that. But then when you come in, that yang is abandoned for that yin-ness, which is more internal. It's physically internal because you're in a cave, but you're also psychologically internal to your consciousness. Actually, for the early brain, those two things were one thing. Going into your deep mind, your deep unconscious, was in all likelihood the same as going deep into the earth. The voice. I like watching that television program, the talent thing called The Voice. But that's not what this is about. Okay, the voice. Obviously, we early humans could begin to vocalize. There's a lot of interesting theories. The one that attracts me the most, I think it's likely, is first if you imagine a normal set of verbalizations, like if somebody laughs or somebody cries or somebody screams, those aren't words, but they communicate very important information. It's a nice way of saying it. There's one principle called the singing Neanderthals. And the premise, not just limited to Neanderthals, but it was that early humans having this natural vocalization, to get your attention, or to cry, or laugh, that this had a more, what we would call musical quality than a cognitive quality. It wasn't a word first, it was a feeling first. And that the early communications tended to be more of a sing-song, grunting, emotive communication than it was fire, dog. That didn't come first. That the human voice was more of a bottom-up, emotive, attentional communication than it was a top-down, symbolic set of words and concepts. And that fits very nicely with a lot of the concept in the NeuroVIZR, where all these different sessions tend to have soundscapes that are not conventional compositional music, although we can also explore that, but that it is a vocalization that is not conceptual, it's more emotive, it has more of a musical quality than a language quality, is something that I think is reasonable in terms of the prehistoric brain, and that I think, without getting too fancy here, that the concept of seed syllables, talking about mantras, where just sounds, ah, ee, oh, that these communicate at a level of simplistic consciousness powerfully without having to add it in as a word to say the sound. So the premise here is that sounds in and of themselves, human sounds, were communicative, not because they were expressing a concept as much as they were expressing a feeling. So the singing, I think that as early humans, the prehistoric brain, in terms of sound, when you're in the cave and you hear these sounds, the sound itself is the information. It isn't somebody saying, help. They're going, ah, which means you want help. So it's not help, help, help. Okay, so let's imagine all of it together. Dark cave, amazing acoustics, light from fire, flickering fire, creating altered states. You're there communally, intergenerationally, feeling the same thing at the same time, looking at the same thing, pointing at the same thing, and the beginnings of wanting to symbolize this, where the voice becomes a symbol, but also you want to start to depict, try to show what you saw. And many of the early cave arts, yeah, they're, an antelope or something, but even earlier, you have what we would call the Kluver form constants. You see spirals, you see checkerboards, you see radio, you see kind of shapes that are like tunnels or fun, that our prehistoric brain wanted to begin to engage in this. So imagine the cave art being like the phosphenes and the geometrics that you see in your mind's eye in the dark anyway, or maybe after the flickering fire. And you put it there, and then you can see it, and imagine the flickering fire almost animating, bringing to life that cave art. So it's like a movie. To the primitive brain, they watch a movie, they see it all come to life, and their eyes are open, their eyes are closed. They're also seeing the geometrics that you see with the NeuroVIZR. They're also seeing these colors, and they're also seeing the depictions on the wall coming alive. This is a very important concept. The way that we think of inside and outside, it's likely they didn't have that. That what they were seeing was as much inside as it was outside. It was a magical spirit, animus kind of life where everything was alive. Even the walls were alive. There, the walls were talking, they were singing, there are the echoes, here's the crackling fire, here's the, of maybe like an earthquake or something like that. That the early human voice just blended into this category of no inside, no outside. It just happens, and it's all unexplainable. You don't understand it. So in your mind, you begin to create stories to hold it together.